all probably heard that paraphrase of you should never always start your business with the end in mind. Be prepared for exit, blah, blah, blah. That's a bit cliche, but I suppose in hindsight, it's probably pretty true. And today we're going to be talking about how you can make sure that your business is ready for sale. Now, over the years, I've spoken with hundreds and hundreds of tradespeople and contractors in different markets all over the world. And there's still a lot of people out there that have that whole mindset of, well, I am my business and, the business is nothing without me. And for the better part, I sort of tend to say, well, yeah, with that attitude, you're right. You're 100% right. And it will never be anything beyond you unless you start putting in some processes and start to change the way your business is structured. And so today we're talking about, okay, well, how do I make sure that this business is ready for sale? So if somebody comes along one day, I've got something that's, acquirable. We talk a lot about this in the SiteShed podcast. We talk more about this on the space of having processes and operating procedures and, systems in place and databases and that kind of thing. Today we're talking a little bit more on the legal side of things. If you're interested in this topic, guys, there's also a series we did going back in November of 2019, was it? Yeah. And that was How to Sell Your Trade Business. That was episode 220, 221, 222. So I'll check those ones out. I'd love to hear your experiences here, guys. I know this is something that's pretty near and dear to a lot of business owners. They'd love the idea of one day being able to sell their business, but they have no idea about how to do it. And so we're trying to shed a bit of light on that for you. If you want to be part of this conversation, jump across to the Facebook community. It's where most of these conversations are spurred. So we'd love to have you a part of that if you're not already. And that's a free community on Facebook. You just go and search the SiteShed. There's a page and a group, like them both. And we'll be able to have that conversation within there. If you've got follow-up questions that we haven't covered in this episode, post those questions again in the Facebook group, and I will get them answered for you, if it means recording another podcast. So, good show, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in the community. Ciao. Today's podcast has been proudly brought to you by Tradie Web Guys. Tradie Web Guys work with tradespeople only on their websites and marketing solutions to help them stand out from their competition. Everything from web design through to SEO, search engine marketing, content creation, you name it, guys. It is a customized solution for trade-based organizations, and it's fantastic. Head across to tradiewebguys.com.au/apply, fill in the form, and let's have a conversation.
Giving tradies and contractors around the globe the tools to run a modern business. You're listening to Toolbox Talks from the SiteShed. Now here's your host, Matt Jones.
Hello, listeners and viewers. Welcome back to the SiteShed podcast. My name is Matt Jones, and you are joining us for part 2 of the podcast series that we are doing on protecting your trade business from legal risk. The contracts lawyer. Helen, welcome.
Hi, Matt. Great to speak to you again.
Absolutely. And your website is the contractslawyer.com.au. That's contracts with an S. Helen, the first episode was fantastic. We were talking about how to make sure you get paid, relevant to not just tradespeople, but businesses as a whole. So if you haven't heard that, guys, go check it out. Today, we're talking about how to make sure your business is ready for sale. Another interesting topic of which I've had mixed feedback in the past. So I'm looking forward to hearing your take on that, Helen. Now, before we jump in, do you just want to give us a bit of a background as to, I suppose, your business and maybe a bit of a recap on episode 1?
Oh, sure, yeah. So I'm a business lawyer. I've been doing this for 20 years now. Started off in the UK. I've worked at some of Australia's top law firms, and I've run my own law firm. And I'm just really passionate about helping business owners stay in business. I used to say before COVID-19, I used to say I'm passionate about helping business owners grow. I think at this stage, we need to just survive. And while we're in hibernation, there's a lot of things we can be doing to make sure that, we come out of this stronger than we went in. So in a previous life, I would be all passionate about helping you buy and sell businesses, lease business premises, and franchise a successful business. Obviously a very practical person. I know that those sorts of things are going to be on hold for now. So I'm now turning my energies towards helping people make sure they get paid. So that was the last episode where we talked about how important it was to have well-drafted terms and conditions, certain clauses that you absolutely have to have in there, make sure that you do get paid for the work you do. And today I want to make sure that your businesses are as robust as they can be. Now we've entitled it how to make sure, how to get your business ready for sale. But every business should always be ready for sale, because that's the mark of a truly successful business. So even if you are not thinking about selling your business, this should just be your business checklist for how to get your business in order, how to get your ducks in line.
There's that cliche that I'm sure we've all heard, you should always build your business with the end in mind,
Mm-hmm.
I suppose that kind of ties in closely to what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've dealt with many, many businesses over the years, as you can imagine, from very, very high profile businesses when I was at the top floor of the terrace when I was working in Perth for Freehills, to also, startups. But what I see time and time again is the most successful companies have addressed every issue that they need to. We can't cover everything today, but we can cover some of the main things that I think you should be turning your attention to.
Yeah, for sure. I know in the past I've done similar podcasts on similar topics, and I've had loads of, our thing has always been from the beginning with a digital agency, we want to try and equip you guys with assets that can potentially be acquired. And I've had so many customers. Well, customers are normally okay. Friends, definitely. They're the hardest people to convince, I've found in the past, because they don't want to hear anything that you've got to tell them. But, oh no, the old argument, my business is me, and without my business, there is no business. Without me, there is no business. And for the better part, I say, well, you're probably right. At the moment, the way your business is set up, you are the business, and the business will not run without you. So yeah, congratulations. However, I also have worked in businesses, in organizations that have very proactively acquired companies. I mean, in the short time that I was working in one of them for maybe 5 years or something, I think I saw them buy 4 or 5 companies, and bolted onto their company. So businesses, like trade businesses, there are people out there that want to buy them. And, that mindset, I mean, if you never want to sell your business, sure, just go ahead with the whole, my business is me, and without it, it will never be a business. That's fine. But if you actually do want to sell it, you can sell it. You just need to get some shit in order.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can sell anything. Gosh, I've helped people buy dog grooming parlours, massage parlours. There's always businesses that you can buy. And I think savvy investors will be looking at them now. They'll be trying to get a deal. So that's what you don't want to make sure that you're not one of the people who give somebody a good deal now. And right. By getting all your ducks in line, you can make sure that you can get the maximum value. Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? We should probably highlight the fact that it's April 2020, and we're sort of just entering into the whole COVID-19 situation here, when it's been a bit.
We'll be on day 74, I think it said on the news today.
Right. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the marketplace. But I literally came off a podcast I'm recording this morning, and we were talking actually about, the reality of, there's going to be potentially a lot of your competitors that are maybe not going to make it through this, and they might be wanting to put their business up for sale, which is, if you're in the right position, a fantastic opportunity. And again, I don't like to make light of a dark situation, but I do honestly believe that in crises like we're experiencing at the moment, there's an unfathomed amount of opportunity available for people that are willing to, and ready and willing to sort of take action,
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You just can't bury your heads now and say, why me? Why is this happening? This is so unfair. You've just got to go, right, this is happening, and this is what we need to do. And one of the things that I want people to do is to start working through this checklist of like a legal business health checklist, so that they can come out of this and knowing that their business is stronger than it went in the same way as we're all trying to pump up our muscles now and lose a bit of weight during this. Let's make sure our businesses are all pumped as well.
That's a really good point. And, I've said it a number of times recently, like the businesses that are going to make it through this. And to be fair, we're kind of preaching to the choir here. Like, we're talking as a podcast, like these guys, people that watch this and listen to this are typically people, they're action takers, they're business owners, like they're pretty savvy, that, they want to learn, and they're good implementers. But like you and I both know that, in the wake of this is one of the things, potentially, like businesses are going to have this now an arm in their business that's legally protected, and they're going to come in, emerge from this crisis with stronger policies around their whole, legal department, so on and so forth. Whereas coming into it, they may not have had, but now we've sort of got the time, they're getting the education, they're learning, they've got being equipped with tools and frameworks, and, getting the right people in your corner like yourselves. And, I think there's going to be some exceptional stories come out of this.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing them.
All right, I won't interrupt you again. Well, I will.
That's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. It's my podcast. I'll do what I want.
Your podcast. Yeah, you do what you want. As long as you don't swear, I don't mind.
Well,
good.
Better note that.
Didn't mention I'm a bit of a prude.
Mm.
Which didn't work very well when I was working on in a construction site on health and safety, because you can imagine some of the language that I got when I asked people to get down off the scaffolding. That was the start of my law career. Yeah, so I just really want to make sure that everybody, whether they were thinking about selling the business before they went into this, or whether this whole crisis has made them think, I really didn't want to be in business for myself anymore, and when this is all finished, I'm going to flick it. Whatever the reason is, you need to make sure that when it comes time to sell, that you get a good offer, and then that the sale goes through smoothly. There's so many businesses that go on the market. Thousands of businesses don't sell, or they sell for considerably less than what the vendor had hoped for. So one of the things is to make sure that you work with experienced professionals to make sure that you can actually, maximize the value and efficiency of the sale. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make this part of it. I was thinking about what people can do while they're hibernating. If we do go on lockdown, we're not on lockdown at the moment. 7th of April, we're being asked to stay at home and only go out for essential visits. So it's not strictly lockdown in the same way as the UK is on. If we do go into lockdown, then people are going to need to really start, being proactive about what they do all day. You can't sit around and watch daytime TV and drink beer all day. So
not if the beer runs out.
I know, that's worrying, isn't it?
It's
one of the most worrying thing. I know I've worked in WA for many years, and I think they're on 3 bottles of wine now, restrictions. We're still on 12 here in Queensland. If it gets much less than that, then I won't be doing any more of these podcasts because I'll just be queuing outside Dan Murphy's.
Classic.
Yeah. Anyway. You don't know me well enough yet to know that I'm not joking. Moving along swiftly, yeah. So what I've done here is just, I want to give some top tips on how to get your business ready for sale. Have you ever sold a business, Matt?
I haven't. No, I've never sold a business. I've worked. Oh, actually, I've never been in a business that's been sold either. I've only been in a business that's acquired businesses.
Okay. Were you involved in that process at all?
No, not really.
Well, that's the thing. So I remember I said pre-COVID-19, I was helping a lot of people buy and sell businesses. So regular referrals from business brokers. So I was kind of the go-to person for buying and selling businesses in Queensland and New South Wales, which was great. And, nothing more exciting than when you speak to a buyer or a seller and they say, I've never bought a business before, or the seller says, I've never sold a business before, because that's when I can come in and go, brilliant, let me tell you the process, break down the process for them. I explain to them the different stages. I also explain to them the different emotional roller coaster that they'll go on, because I understand, day 1 is excitement and day 10 is remorse and, all that type of thing. So I can really help with that. So I think, the first step to getting your business ready for sale is understanding that process. A good lawyer, a good business broker will explain that process to you. So the way I break it down, Matt, is I say that there's essentially 3 main stages of selling a business. The first stage, which is what we're going to talk about today, is getting your business ready for sale.
Right.
And then, obviously it gets marketed and we find a buyer and we negotiate the terms and we enter into a contract. And that's what I call the contract stage, because that's when it often ends up on the desk of a lawyer, and then the lawyer's tracking all the key dates and obligations of the parties to move towards the last stage, which is settlement. So that's when you actually transfer everything you need to transfer and get your money.
Okay.
So like I say, what I'm talking about today is the getting your business ready for sale, which is one of the stages that people don't often do. They skip that stage and just go straight to phoning the broker,
right,
and saying, I want you to list my business. Here's my business. Here's my financials. Here's some other rubbish I found in my inbox. And, and the poor broker has to try and put together an information memorandum and try and sell this business to the world when there's lots of holes, and the vendor might not even be interested in talking about where the broker's found some of these holes.
Right.
I want to make sure that your listeners don't have any of those holes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've got colleagues and a friend even at the moment he's trying to sell a business, and he's been trying for a while. And I feel like so often we don't equip the vendor with the right information and the right material, and then the sale falls through, and then all of a sudden it's their fault. That broker was crap, couldn't sell the business.
Oh yeah, no. If a broker's been doing it for a number of years, then the broker won't be crap, as you put it. And there you go, I've just broken my own rule. Sword.
Sword?
Sword. Actually, crap's not really swearing.
No, exactly.
Yeah, the kids wouldn't get in trouble for that, really, unless they said it at school in front of the headmistress.
Yeah.
Yeah, people do blame the brokers, and people blame the lawyers sometimes as well, which is really frustrating. So they think the lawyers have overcomplicated things. And, we have to actually look at everything. So if I'm acting for a buyer and I'm doing a due diligence, I have to look at everything. Mm-hmm. And if I do spot things, leases that are maybe they've expired and they're holding over, well, that's not as good as a lease that's got a 5-year term left to run. So these sort of things I will have to raise with the buyer and say, look, this is an issue. But there's always a practical suggestion as well. So some lawyers will just go, here's an issue. Be worried, be really afraid, don't touch this business. Or some lawyers will say, there's an issue, but here's a solution that you could explore. And did you want us to call the broker and try and sort this out?
So for years, we've been working with businesses, as I said before, trying to help them, I suppose, prepare, establish, build, evolve, assets within the company, whether it's, their website or their email marketing program and database and all that kind of stuff. Heard from a number of different people and guests we've had on the show and experts and so on and so forth. And they sort of say, well, if you're looking at acquiring businesses, we're normally looking at, first of all, we want to see the database because it's super important. If we can add it to ours and it's relevant, and, we can effectively add an extra vertical to what we're doing. And then, of course, they're like, well, also, how the business runs, the processes, the procedures, the staff that's involved, goodwill, all this kind of stuff. So are we going to talk about that sort of nitty gritty stuff? Or are we talking more about the actual, the documents and the legal hoo-ha that needs to be in order?
Legal hoo-ha. No, we're going to be talking about sort of things that you need to do to get your business ready for sale. So very practical tips that you can go and do yourself.
All right, go.
Okay, so basically the reason why I want to talk about this is because I see businesses time and time again that have issues that should have been thought about before the business went on the market. This often happens where there's no broker involved. So good business brokers will actually sort out some of these issues with you, help you, or direct you to go and see your lawyer or your accountant to do that. So it's usually private sales where we see these major issues that actually derail the sale, which could have been sorted out. So the reason why this is important is you might think, oh, well, I've dealt with all this for years, but, the buyer will just have to like it and lump it, much like when you sell a house and you think, well, I'm not too bothered that there's holes in the carpet and etc. The buyer will be. The buyer will actually engage the lawyer to do a buyer's due diligence, and that's when they'll come across things that could actually force them to pull out of the contract with you. So what I actually suggest, as soon as I find out that one of my clients wants to sell their business, is that they engage a lawyer, engage me, to do a seller's due diligence. Some of the things that you need to look at through a seller's due diligence, and like I say, you can do this yourself, are as follows. First of all, you should ensure that the business name is registered to the seller. That might sound really obvious, but if you think about, maybe two brothers, one of them bought the business name, Brothers Electrical or something, and then they actually, a year later, their accountant said, this isn't good for tax purposes, you need to set up Brothers Electrical Pty Ltd, that type of thing. When we strip right the way back, that business name is still registered to one of those brothers, and that's not the seller of the business. Again, it's not a deal breaker, but what you don't want is more and more of these dominoes being pushed, which force the buyer to go, oh, this business isn't in order, it's all over the place, I'm not going ahead. Mm-hmm. So just go onto the the ASIC website, plug in your business name, and make sure that it is in the name of the legal entity that owns the business. Mm-hmm. The same goes for any trademarks. The next episode that we're going to record is about trademarks. So if you do have a registered trademark, again, make sure that the owner of the business owns the trademark. Also have a look at PPSR charges. And PPSR is the Personal Property Securities Register. This is essentially a charges register. You'll have all come across it for vehicle finance. So when you buy a vehicle, so whoever's lending you the money for it.
A credit check.
Yeah, PPSR, Personal Property Securities Register. It's where third parties register their interest in assets that aren't real property. So it's not banks and mortgages on property, it's everything else.
Oh.
So over vehicles, over bits of equipment. So I'll give you an example. So if I am approached to sell a cafe, for example, and I'll go to the PPSR and plug in the name of the owner of the company, the company name, their ABN and their ACN, and then print out a list of all the parties that have charges. Now, often you'll see like Schweppes and Coca-Cola, depending on which one they've gone with, will have a floating charge over, the consignment stock that comes into the fridges and for the loan of the fridges. They'll also have, the coffee companies will also have charges on there, and any suppliers that sell on consignment. So there's usually a lot there, and often I can pick up the phone to my vendor or client and say, which of these are still current? And they'll often laugh and go, I've been using Schweppes for years, or we've not used such and such, Bit Foods for years, in which case you can actually grab a search. There's a phone number on there for the party you put the charge on, the secured party, and you can just phone them or email them and say, can you remove this charge?
How would that apply to like a trade business?
That would apply in terms of vehicles. So your vehicles, if you've got vehicle finance, that will be on there. Any equipment that they might hire. So especially where you've got those larger parts of equipment.
Machinery.
Machinery, plant and equipment that, it doesn't belong to them, or it's on a rental agreement or a hire purchase agreement.
Yeah, okay.
The owner will have registered their interest on the PPSR. But because you know that the buyer's going to pull a list of that, you want to make sure it's only showing the charges that are relevant.
Right.
Because the more charges that show on there, the more it makes a buyer think that you're running on credit.
Right.
And that you owe a lot of people money because they've registered their interest in your assets on there. So that needs to be kept up to date. So that's a pretty good thing that you can do yourself. You can just go onto the PPSR website and plug in your details and see what third parties have popped against you and your company. Another thing that I always like to do is to make sure that all key contracts are documented. So it might be that you've been supplying, Bob Smith for years, but you've only got a handshake arrangement. When it comes to selling your business, that's not worth anything. So if you do have regular customer agreements or supply agreements, then you just need to get those in writing. Relatively simple exercise. A lawyer can help, and so that will actually increase the value of your business.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because you hear all this stuff around, like verbal agreement is contractual or whatever. Does that tie into what you're saying here?
Yeah, it's just that a verbal agreement isn't tangible. You can't see it. You can't touch it. You can't PDF it and drop it into a Dropbox of documents relevant to a business. You can't.
And how do you prove it?
How do you prove it? Both, it just gets really, and this is where it gets so legal that it's just, you're just wasting money on legals, whereas that's why I'm the contracts lawyer, because I want everything in a contract, because then you've got it and you can point to it and you can circle it and you can highlight it and say, we've got this exclusive supply arrangement where we're the only people in Queensland who can supply this particular widget, which we use on our jobs, which makes us 50% more efficient. And I'll say, that's fantastic. Where's the exclusive supply agreement? If they can forward me that and I can see that there's 3 years left to run on it and it can't be terminated, and other than for default, that's fantastic. You've got a real advantage here over your competitors. Somebody told me that, they've got this agreement with this person from New Zealand and they never put anything in writing. Well, I just wouldn't even bother mentioning it.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then one of the other things that probably not so relevant to tradies, unless, they do have a showroom or a workshop perhaps, and they're leasing those premises, or storage facilities perhaps for equipment. The lease, like I mentioned before, leases do need to have a sufficient time to run to be any benefit to the buyer. So you want to make sure that your lease dates don't expire. You want to make sure that you're not holding over, because when leases finish, often you hold over as a monthly tenant, in which case either party can give a month's notice to leave, which isn't particularly attractive to a buyer. It's also not particularly attractive to a buyer's bank. If, there are commercial premises that are crucial to the running of the business, they want to make sure that there's sufficient time. They used to say 7 years, not quite as bad anymore, because people don't really like entering into leases for more than 5 years.
Right.
But you really do want to make sure that you've got some sufficient term left to run on your lease, and also some more options perhaps.
What do you mean options?
Options. So with a commercial lease, instead of granting maybe 10-year or a 20-year, often you get an initial term of 10 years plus maybe 3 more further terms of 5 years. And then tenants have the option, if they want to notify the landlord within an option period to say, I do intend to exercise my option for that further 5-year term. Can you please send me the documents? And that's a really safe way to do it, because nobody would commit for 10 years, 20 years in current climate, and there's as many options as you can get. So that's what the buyer will be looking for, because they'll add them all up and say, well, that's my potential lease term.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. So the other thing to mention as well, if you do have a commercial lease that's nearly expired or expired, it's not necessarily advisable to go and extend the term, because then you've just extended the contractual obligation to pay the landlord for that term. But what you can do is go and speak to the landlord about having some more options put in there. You could vary your lease and ask for some more options. I could go on about leases for hours.
So what would the difference be like in that situation where, I mean, I foresee this potentially being an issue maybe for, especially like for guys that are trying to reduce costs. Maybe they've been in an office set up for a long time, or factory or whatever, and maybe it has rolled over and they want to renew the lease, but they don't want to actually, sign up for 5 years or whatever. So they go to the landlord and say, hey, I'm looking for some options. What sort of options would they be looking like? What would they be entitled to ask for? Like what
Well, it's a negotiation again. If the lease is terminated, if the lease is expired, then really they're almost approaching the landlord as a new tenant, albeit a tenant that's already in there and is already proved that they can pay the rent. So you've already got your golden ticket there, because the landlord's already pre-approved you. Mm-hmm. You'd say to them, look, I really do want some more security of tenure in these premises, but I don't want to commit for too much of a further term. What can we do in terms of further terms? And the landlord would produce what they call a deed of renewal or a deed of variation, and then they'd put in there maybe, the lease is varied to include 2 further terms of 5 years each, commencing on X date, and that way you've got some more certainty that if a tenant wants to stay, they can elect to stay.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we'd probably, and I mean, I'll talk to you about this afterwards, but if you do have lots of listeners who do have commercial premises, it might be worth us picking through what the government and National Cabinet have met today, 7th of April, to discuss what's happening about rents during this period. It might be worth us talking about, what that looks like, and then also what the repercussions are if not paying rent, how that accumulates over the 6 months that they're saying they're going to give some windows of opportunity for you not to pay full rent and things like that, what that looks like and at the end of the term.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I know there's a lot of talk around like pausing mortgage repayments and that kind of stuff, and then everyone was just presuming that would sort of ripple down to renters, because obviously if renters aren't working and they can't pay their rent, then the mortgage hasn't got to be paid. But then there's that whole other argument around, well, interest still needs to be paid, and
exactly. And that's what we're waiting for. I don't know. I mean, I've not been checking my phone or anything while we've been on, but that's what we're waiting for National Cabinet to tell our states and territories today. What needs to be legislated by way of a mandatory code of conduct for commercial leases. So I'm really a bit of a geek, but I'm really excited to find out what they do, and then I can I'm totally a geek. And then I can demystify it and just send out blogs and things just saying this is what's going to happen. But there's always going to be practical consequences. You're not just going to be, the government aren't just going to say, right, no rents to be paid for 6 months.
So top to bottom, give us a quick run through of the steps to make sure your business is ready for sale.
Yep. So just have a really good look at it, first of all. Actually sit down and look at your business as though you're looking at it from the point of view of a buyer. If you think it's something that would have put you off, then get it sorted out. For example, the business name, make sure it's registered to the selling company. Make sure you've got a list of all those third parties who've got charges over your business. And if they're old charges, get them removed so that list is nice and clean and short. Any key contracts that are crucial to the value of your business, get those documented. Pull out your lease and make sure that it's a reasonable lease. You can always flick that to a lawyer and they can make some suggestions about how you can tidy all that up. There's also other things you can look at, which I haven't gone into. Your employment contracts, make sure everybody's on the right awards. Make sure that the current contracts comply with Fair Work. Make sure your terms and conditions, which we talked about in the previous episode. The new buyer will most likely take over your types of contracts. So make sure your client agreements are robust. Make sure you've got all the licenses and permits that you're required to operate the business, because some of those will need to be transferred to the buyer.
And that's pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. Yeah, I didn't want to go into the financial side. Obviously, one of the main bits is to make sure your finances are in order.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's something you can, you got to go through your profit and loss statements. And people will be doing this anyway now, going through and looking at their profit and loss, cancelling any expenses they don't need, for example, subscriptions that aren't crucial to their main operations, and really skimming the fat just to make sure, obviously, profits aren't going to be as good in this period. So let's just try and make sure that your expenses don't blow out as well.
Yeah, it depends. I think we've had opposite experiences so far with a lot of our tradespeople. So
yeah, of course you have, haven't you? And that's probably one of the only people who's been saying that. I've got friends and clients who run medical practices. I mean, they're just run off their feet.
Right.
There's other areas, people in aged care and retirement villages and things are really busy. But, there's obviously other sectors that have just completely, especially in events and things like that.
Yeah, of course.
It's just gone, hasn't it? Yeah, they're on pause indefinitely.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap this one up. In the last episode of this series, we're going to be talking about how to protect your IP, intellectual property. Again, probably a topic that's one of the most important yet most overlooked, I'd say, for a lot of small business. So looking forward to jumping into that. Helen, your website is thecontractslawyer.com.au. Again, you're going to leave some resources behind for you listeners and viewers, which you'll be able to get to thesiteshed.com. Just head across to either the resources page or the podcast page for this episode, or any episode within this series. They'll all be on the same page. And you can get hold of those. Helen, thank you very much for your time. Again, very informative. I learned a lot.
That was great. I enjoy it. Good.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Toolbox Talks. If you're liking what you hear, then you can head across to thesiteshed.com, where you can join our community by signing up to our Toolbox Talks. You'll get sent a weekly notification, which is basically a highlight of everything that we've spoken about during that week, along with any other industry news that may be relevant or specific to the trades. If you're enjoying the show, you can head across to iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, where you can leave us a review. That would be fantastic, and all the reviews get read out in the show. Likewise, if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would benefit from this show and the episodes that we create, then please go ahead and share it with them.